Good evening. I'm Daryl Scott, and welcome to another edition of Code M Radio. For the next 60 minutes, Code M Radio will address topics that affects the lives of people around the world. Code M Radio is just one part of Code Media Group LLC, which also publishes Code M Magazine. The mission of Code M Magazine is to create a trusting community among men that will inspire, educate, and act as a credible resource throughout the journey to manhood. You can visit our website, codemmagazine.com, for more information. If you wish to follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, it's CodeMagIntl. That's CodeMagIntl. As always, I am joined by the Reverend Dr. Leah Lewis. Leah, how are you today?
I'm well, Daryl. How about you?
Well, it's been a rough week for allergies, but I'm doing the best I can.
Hey, I'm with you, brother, on that. Sniffles and sneezing. And those are just two traits you do not want in the age of COVID.
Exactly.
So, Daryl, let me tell you, we have some dynamic folks with us today. We are going to be joined by two creatives from Pittsburgh, one of whom is an old friend of mine and the other who is a new friend. So I want to introduce Shaunda McDill and Monteze Freeland. Shaunda McDill joined the Heinz Endowment in October 2017. As program officer for arts and culture, she works to promote the strength and vitality of a suite of Pittsburgh-based artists and arts organizations through general operating support and a programming portfolio comprised of the Investing in Professional Artists Program, the Small Arts Initiative, the Advancing Black Arts in Pittsburgh Initiative. Shaunda has more than a decade of nonprofit executive and art management experience, working in theater companies across the country, including the Goodman Theatre of Chicago, Second Stage Theatre, Yale Repertory Theatre, Pasadena Playhouse, and the Cornerstone Theatre Company. In 2006, she also founded Demaskus Theater Collective, a nonprofit, service-oriented collective of artists and administrators who produce theatrical projects that share stories of the marginalized. In Pittsburgh, Shaunda served as Vice President of Programming and Cultivation at the August Wilson Center for African American Culture, where she managed all artistic and educational programs, including the production of the city's first Black Dance Festival. As the Pittsburgh Cultural Trust Director of Public Relations, she headed both national and local public relations campaigns. Shaunda has a Bachelor's of Arts degree from Dartmouth College in Hanover, New Hampshire, where she majored in African and African American Studies and minored in theater. She has a master's from Yale University School of Drama with a concentration in theater management. She is a member of Macedonia Church of Pittsburgh and is married to Pittsburgh native Sager McDill. And our second guest is Monteze Freeland. Monteze Freeland is a multidisciplined artist from Baltimore, Maryland, and a 2009 graduate of Point Park University's Conservatory of Performing Arts. In 2017, Monteze was named the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette's Performer of the Year for his performances in Dreamgirls, A Christmas Story, East Texas Hot Links, and Wild with Happy. Additional acting credits include Audrey II in Little Shop of Horrors, Judge Randolph, Captain Whitaker in A Few Good Men, and Kent in King Lear. Monteze has directed for Pittsburgh Playwrights Theater Company, Prime Stage, Kuntu Rep, CLO Summer Academy, Demaskus, and City Theater. As a playwright, his original music, Collapsia, received funding from the Heinz Endowment and was presented by the New Hazlitt CSA Performance Series. Select writing credits include J.H. Mechanics of the Legend with Anya Martin, Santa's TED Talk with Shua Potter, Fishy Woo Woo, Claws Out, A Holiday Drag Musical, and House of Stones with Maurice Redwood. As producing artistic associate for the Pittsburgh Playwrights Theater Company under the artistic direction of Mark Clayton, Southers, the company produced Seven Guitars and King Hedley II in the backyard of August Wilson's childhood home, and Gem of the Ocean, Mr. Southers, Miss Julie, Clarissa and John, under the direction of Mr. Freeland, was selected for production at the National Black Theatre Festival in 2017 and traveled to Edinburgh, Scotland for the Fringe Festival the same year. Monteze is the current associate producer of City Theatre Company. Shaunda and Monteze, welcome to Code M Radio. How are you?
Well, thank you for having me.
I'm great, thank you.
It's so good to have you guys join us. I want to talk to you about your theater collective based in Pittsburgh called Demaskus. How did you two come to be a part of Demaskus? Shaunda, why don't you tell us, since you're the founding member?
Okay, I founded Demaskus back when I was living in Los Angeles. I really believe that the name came to me some time before that, upon graduation from college, when I wasn't sure that Demaskus was a theater company per se. I just knew it was what I believe I was being called to, which was to remove the mask. And of course, in this day and age, we are asking you to keep your mask on, but I'm talking about the more philosophical mask that we all wear. Paul Laurence Dunbar had a poem about we wear the mask, and then also Damascus comes from the ancient Syrian city where Paul in the Bible had his experience and kind of awakening. And so reconciling my faith with my culture, Damascus, and also accepting a charge to try to help others find themselves through the arts is where I came up with the organization. And there have been just artists who work with me in different locations, and we keep the collective as an artistic home. And we were able to get Monteze to direct a show with us recently, and hopefully he'll too come to Damaskus as an artistic home for himself as well whenever he'd like.
Oh, that's great to hear. So Monteze, what drove you to become a member of the Damaskus Theater Collective?
Well, one, I appreciate Shaunda for everything she does for the Pittsburgh community, the arts community here. And I grew up in Black theater, so any chance that I can get to be a part of stories that tell our story, I jump at it. And it really isn't a matter of how, it's just a matter of when. And so I was very grateful to be asked to be a part of it. I have my own personal reservations with the story, as we'll get into it a little more, being a man and directing this story. But I was very grateful to be trusted by the producers and Shaunda and Dominique. So I think it was a really cool partnership, and I'm looking forward to more.
I have a very general question. With this large pool of possible plays that are out there, how do you pick one?
Well, I think you pick one for the time that you're in. You pick one play for, the moment, and then you pick another. That's the great thing about it, is that theater is so living that you can constantly pick a play. But for this particular production, Shaunda definitely has more information about the choosing of Flyin West.
Yes, well, one of the members of the collective came and just said that she wanted to explore the West in this time of Reconstruction, is stories that you don't normally hear. I believe it was timely because we had already chosen to do a reading of Flyin West. We actually wanted to do a full production, but of course with COVID, we weren't able to. So we decided to do an online virtual reading. And what I will share is that sometimes you choose something because it is important and you don't know that it's going to be timely. So at the same time that we were choosing to do the reading, the president was choosing to visit Tulsa, Oklahoma, which was the home of Black Wall Street. And we know the atrocities that took place there with that Black community. And if we don't know, which I have found many people don't know, there have been several cities that were economically strong thriving Black communities that were either burned, destroyed, or there were white speculators that came in to take over those towns. So when Dominique said she wanted to do this story, Dominique Briggs, as a member of the collective and a producer in the group, we went ahead. And I was just really grateful that Monteze came alongside and decided to direct.
So Monteze, you talked about your hesitancy to take this play on because you are a man, and there were a number of issues in the play that gave you some pause. Can you talk about some of those issues and why you think you had that particular sensitivity?
Well, I think that the issues were established outside of the play. As we look in the world and as we look at the marginalization of people, especially within theater, and how opportunities aren't necessarily granted to people of color at the ready, and especially if we were to think about women of color as well. So I'm always going to have a sensitivity to that because I believe that we all need an opportunity and a chance to thrive within our chosen profession. And there are groups of people who do not receive those opportunities as frequently. You know, this is a play written by a woman that has strong female leads and who really carry the play. And I don't necessarily believe that you have to be a woman in order to tell this story effectively or to guide the story. But I do think that there probably are things that a woman can bring to this story that I cannot. And I'm aware of that. And so that's where you open the door for collaboration, because I will never know the entire world of a play, even if I wrote it. And so you always need other eyes in the room. So I was very grateful that there were wonderful, strong, opinionated, and right voices in the room to keep me on the correct path as we moved ahead and told this story.
Well, that's very enlightening, and I thank you for sharing those insights, Monteze, because I didn't know if the themes of domestic violence, perhaps, were something that gave you pause. So I'm going to turn this question over to Shaunda. Shaunda, you all opted to do Flyin West by Pearl Cleage, and there are issues like colorism in the play and domestic violence. As an African-American woman, were you drawn to the play? Were you also simultaneously repulsed by the play, particularly the character of Frank Charles? What were your feelings and thoughts about the work?
I was not repulsed by the play, but I was repulsed by the things that are a part of our history and culture and things that were presented that are challenges within the Black community and that have been that the Black community has been victim of in American history. So I think that it's an amazing masterpiece of a work to be able to bring in not only she was talking about immigration. Really, when you think about the Black people talking about the Mexicans and Fan and Will's experience in Mexico, like there were a lot of things that were a part of this piece. But certainly the domestic violence is troubling. Certainly colorism is troubling. Certainly, but we already know that history. We know there was a talented 10th. We know that there was, even among Black colleges, a paper bag test. And we know that these things existed, and I think us being able to look them squarely in the face and actually wrestle with them in an honest way is the work that we have to do. I think some of the biggest atrocities were one that were so eloquently written that we overlooked them. For instance, when you think about manhood and you think about Miss Leah saying that her husband, who we don't get to meet, on the plantation, that he had 20 babies sold from him that he never saw, and she made a vow that she wanted him to see them. And so then the baby she had hoped he would see, but he didn't. And then they had 5 free babies together once they had left, and all of them died by the fever. So at this point, we're talking about 26 babies at least, and a man who had to wrestle with the loss of all those children and ultimately went crazy because of that challenge. And I think there are men who are visible in this play who we never see. And I think some of those atrocities she put forth in a genius way. So those stories were still running parallel to the stories of the women who were left behind to carry on the legacy.
Are the actors and actresses people that you know? And if they are, how do you bring these emotions and that feeling out of them to have this impact in the play?
I knew majority of the cast. This process was a little different than typical processes where you would have auditions and actors would come in and perform in front of you essentially, and you choose who's the best. And so that wasn't the case here. It was a matter of the cast had a reading of this play about, was it a year ago, Shaunda?
Yes, it was
Yeah.
about a year ago in Dominique's living room. So we were able to be together. So yeah, at least 6 months ago.
Right. So they were able to come together and read the play. And then from that, they decided to move to the next step and bring a director on. So essentially, I inherited a cast, a brilliant cast. And that doesn't always happen, So I was very excited about working with the actors. And I think that when it comes to stories that are just written well, you don't have to dig too deep to tell the stories. If they're written well, they are written with the human vernacular, with the human emotion on the page. And it's about creating a safe space for your actors to be vulnerable. And I think that's the biggest tool for a director. If you can't create a room in which your actors can play, then you are already doomed. And so my job is to be as open and as malleable and to listen, to learn the language of every actor that I'm communicating with, to understand their temperament, to push them beyond their boundaries and where they're willing to go in a positive direction, and to trust them ultimately. It's no tricks. It's really just being, I think, a genuine person and allowing the artist to thrive. It was an absolute pleasure, and I dare not say easy, but it wasn't necessarily difficult to work with this cast and to have them rise to the occasion.
So did you feel any extra pressure? I mean, did you put more pressure on yourself, or is it just the pressure of trying to get this group to come and work together?
Oh, I always feel the pressure every show. You want it to be great. You want the show to be great. And working in this format, there was a new pressure because on stage, the people are in control. If someone messes up, they can work together to fix it. In this medium, anything can go wrong in which it's not human error. It can be a computer error. This is something that I'm sure that, you've experienced or you probably don't want to experience. And so for theater artists, that's a little different for us to go through. So it did add extra level of anxiety, but I find that nervous energy is good energy because it means you care about what you're doing.
Our conversation with Shaunda McDill and Monteze Freeland continues after this. Code M Radio will be right back. You're listening to Code M Radio. Don't forget to visit codemmagazine.com for more information. Shaunda and Monteze, this play was done via Zoom. First of all, how did you make the decision to go to Zoom? And then just the whole technology, how did you pull this together?
Really have to thank Adrian Holmes, who used Zoom for other events. I mean, this is quickly becoming a medium for people to do their art. And the reality is artists are gonna art. They're gonna find a way to make their art work and to produce it. That quote is from a colleague of mine who I work with, Celeste Smith, and she always say, artists are gonna art. And so at the end of the day, you have to find a way that you can reach people. The reality is, if we think about it, we're a small company. We reach more people through Zoom with this production than some of our live performances. So there's a great opportunity. And then Monteze did a great job of using props and exchanging props so that you're looking at people making motions and it looks as though they're actually passing things to one another on the screen. And I'll just want him to talk a little bit more about his thoughts on that. But we really wanted it to be an experience for people where people weren't just reading lines, but that in this moment where we're all under quarantine and social distance, people could have and imagine some sort of a real semblance of a world.
Yes, this format is becoming widely used to present theater in a more commercial way and also in a personal way. It's allowing artists to just have readings of plays with friends across the country and to grow as artists during the time where we actually have time. So I'm very proud and grateful for the innovations coming through digital theater. There are some people who have, theater artists are always hard to please. And some people who are a little zoomed out or zoom fatigue, but I'm not quite there yet. I'm excited about how we can push forward in this medium. But looking at it, all started with Shaunda's vision. Shaunda did not just want to have people looking in a book and then looking at a camera and presenting this play. We wanted it to be an experience, and we wanted it to have a bit of theater magic, if you will. So we had pieces of costumes. We also had, music to help set the scene as to where we were. And we also, as Shaunda said, the props, the passing of the props, and using little moments and actual tangible objects to help push the story further. When you go to the theater and you see a stage reading, which is not always my favorite thing to do because you're literally watching people read, it's void of all of that. So this is actually a step above what you would get inside of a theater, and it's right there in your living room or on your computer or on your phone.
So I want to give a little context and then some data before I give my next question. So we're talking about the play Flyin West, written by Pearl Cleage, produced by Demaskus Theater Collective out of Pittsburgh, and it appeared online. It can currently be found on Facebook. Do a search for Flyin West. To date, the play has reached 3,636 people. There have been 1,800 views, 28 shares, and 191 comments. I had the good fortune of participating in the play as your narrator, and I was really just blown away how perfectly cast each and every individual was. And also, I have to second Daryl's comments regarding the props and the ways in which they were handled. Do you all think that you are setting a standard now for online theater productions? Shaunda, why don't you give that question a stab?
I hope we're participating in setting a standard and for online theater productions. I think it's difficult. One of the challenges to go back for a moment to something Daryl asked and then to move forward into your question is, when you're in a theater, even if you have a stage reading, you're getting feedback immediately. People are laughing, you can hear them, they might sigh, they might emote in some way, whereas we had no clue what people's response was as we were moving through the piece. In some ways, I think it helped to build a deeper ensemble feeling because we really were relying on one another as the sole response to what it is we were delivering. And what I will say is the public theater here in Pittsburgh is under great leadership. Mariah C. Kaminsky, they have been doing work. The other Lort Theater in town, City Theater, has been doing some great work online. What I hadn't seen, and Monteze, I think, mentioned, was that we may have been the first Black theater company to do something online with a fully Black cast. And I know he has some work coming up, another play that he's directing that he can mention that is a fully Black cast. I think there may be one person who is not Black. But I hope we are always forward thinking and a part of setting a standard. And even if it's been done before, I hope Demaskus is always doing something in a new way that someone has not seen and experienced.
I agree, Shaunda. I mean, Demaskus did set the standard, in my opinion. And I think that it was evident by who we reached. The other companies, yes, they have built-in subscribers and they have built-in audience members who are going to support the theater because they can and because they want to. And then as we think about who we attracted, and we attracted people who love theater or who may have loved the people in the show and were mesmerized and stayed, and not only stayed, but showed such love in the comments and shared and viewed more than once. And I do believe that this was the first presentation produced by Black people and starring Black people, and for everyone, of course, but specifically for Black people. And this is Pittsburgh, and we did this in July, and the online performing started in March. So I hope that it emboldened local producers and artists and writers and actors to say, oh, we can do this too, because ultimately, I mean, well, our production wasn't, but ultimately it's free. And you can produce shows probably for the cost of a more advanced Zoom account, and there you are, and your show can be viewed in countries across the world. So I hope that we encourage people to take the chance and to have a vision and to push the needle forward.
I want to add also before the next question, something Monteze said about ours wasn't free. It was important to Damaskus. We understand that there are artists out of work, even if they are creating their own art and they're doing things. This is a career. These are people's jobs and their livelihood. So for us, it was important to pay Monteze for his time. It was important to pay the members of the collective and try to give a little stipend to our narrator, Miss Leah, and to others, because this is a career field, this is an industry. And there are a lot of people in this field that are suffering right now because of the current climate. And I think that I just wanted to make that point that it's important to pay people, particularly if you have a Black cast in Pittsburgh, where the poverty level is so high among our community.
Monteze, I'll ask you this. So while you're rehearsing, everybody's got Zoom accounts. And so are you watching them on screen? And if so, how do you tell them to cut, or how are you handling that portion since you're not in front of them? You're basically on a camera.
Right. Yeah. There is the margin for error, and there's also the chance to learn, of course, but really it's communication. I think that's the basis of what we do. I think that I could direct someone without even having to look at them and see what they look like. I could hear their voice and say, okay, we could add this layer or take that away. But in this medium, the actors had to be their own crew. They had to be their own prop person, costume person, hair person, stage manager in a sense. They control when they are on the screen and when they are heard and when they're seen and not seen. So it required a lot for the actors that is a little bit out of their natural wheelhouse. So we all had to learn pretty quickly. But directing them, it really didn't feel like much of a difference. You can't see that, you can't feel that energy all the time. But there were times when I would watch a scene or just listen to a scene, I would think that I'm sitting right there with them. Artists have that way of just drawing you in. But there were more moments of joy and discoveries than there were moments of, oh, I don't know how this is going to happen. So that was the great part about it.
So Shaunda, I want to pick up on a point you made just a moment ago about ensuring that the participants, professional actors, and your amateur narrator, making sure that they received stipends and were paid for their time. But you also invoked a critical piece of data about the poverty level in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh and Cleveland and Detroit, our Midwestern neighbor, are often at the top of the list when it comes to poverty. How have you and Monteze been able to do Black art under such circumstances?
That's a great question. For me, I will say I was really strategic about my career in that I tried to build a career as an arts administrator, even though I started as an artist. So for me, it was like, if I have to do any work, I want the work to be adjacent to the art that I want to do. So I'm going to get trained and do work that way so that I can pursue my creative pursuits when, as a luxury, really, because, I don't come from a family that had wealth a lot, and that is another issue and challenge for Black people being able to stay in this field. They don't have, these legacies where they can just pursue this most of the time at their leisure, or as some sort of a hobby. My family thought I was crazy to be going to school for theater or to be, and then, you know, really didn't take it seriously until I got into Yale. When I went to Yale School of Drama, they were like, oh, okay, like this is a serious thing and you plan to earn a living. But I will say, honestly, I've also committed my life to designing my life and not really always thinking about earning a living. There have been consequences to that, both negative and positive, but I've lived all over this country. I think my passion has driven me. And I think in this city where there's such great need, I just try to do the best I can with what I have, even sometimes paying artists out my own paycheck. So if I'm working in philanthropy, how am I taking that money and reinvesting it into people and community so that they can do their work as well?
I grew up in the Arena Players Theater in Baltimore, Maryland, which is the oldest continuously running African-American community theater in the country. And so I had a very strong foundation of theater, and I don't subscribe to the fact that Black people don't go to the theater. We do. Tyler Perry wouldn't be who he is without Black people going to the theater. Pearl Cleage wouldn't be who she is, and this person honking the horn wouldn't be who they are without going to the theater. You know, so that is a myth that we have to dispel, that I believe many people have started to keep us outside of the theater. And I went to a university in which I saw many of my Black friends and classmates have to drop out because of the way that this business is set up. It's not set up for marginalized people or oppressed people to succeed. And so therefore, if we know that, then what we're going to do, we're just going to keep making our art. And that's all we can do. So I have to pay attention to it because I want to change it. But I also feel as though we can't lean on that and give that too much attention because we still have work to do. I have to still think about the Monteze behind me and reach back and pull him up, just as Robert Chu and Troy Burton did for myself.
Our conversation with Shaunda McDill and Monteze Freeland continues after this, when Code M Radio returns. You're listening to Code M Radio. This portion of Code M Radio is brought to you by Code M Magazine. Shaunda, somewhere in your last comment, you made a statement of talking about designing your life. Can you expound on that?
Absolutely. I remember early on, a lot of people have informed my life, but one was a pastor by the name of A.R. Bernard out of Brooklyn, New York. And one thing he used to talk about was designing your life. And so when asked by my dean of students, Ben Mordecai, who produced much of August Wilson's work on Broadway, how was I going to earn a living upon graduation? I told him I don't plan to earn a living. I plan to design my life. And by that, I just mean I plan to make decisions authentically centered in where I see myself and what I see myself doing, not necessarily follow a traditional path from A to Z. It's not traditional necessarily to go to Dartmouth and spend all the money that I spent as an undergrad to end up in the theater. But upon being there, it was the right place to be because they had a very vibrant arts community at the Hop on campus. And while I was there, August Wilson and others came to teach for something called the Convening on Golden Pond. So every Black theater practitioner ended up descending on my college campus while I was an undergrad. And that was a part of, again, me making a choice to be there, not knowing they were going to be there, but by designing my life, these things happen because you're not necessarily looking for pay or position, you are looking to follow your purpose. And so I believe in designing one's life. And although there are consequences for that are both good and bad, and there are ways I could have managed things better in certain places, I've never gone too hungry. I've always had a place to put my head at night. And I feel continuing to walk in purpose in a way that I feel super fulfilled and being able to work with great artists and people like Leah and Monteze and the artists here in Pittsburgh. So so far so good with that plan.
Shaunda, that is just pure fire. I mean, I'm so inspired by it. And as one who has, seen portions of your work, I know that you have given us a very authentic response. Monteze, do you have your own philosophy of life and philosophy of art?
I'm sure I do. But no, I think my philosophy of art is that we should tell the stories as Flyin West does and will continue to do. Stories, we need to basically illuminate the stories that we have hidden, the people that we hide, the people that we are ashamed of, that we don't value or refuse to value because we actually know their value and we know what it looks like when they actually shine. And we have to put those people on stage and put those people into the world in art, because I believe that if you don't see yourself in art, then you will feel as though you don't have a place in the world. And I saw that when I took my niece to see the remake of Annie, and she sat there and just was mesmerized at the screen because there was a little black girl who looked like her and sang and danced the way she liked to as well, and that encouraged her to be an artist. So I think that it's very important that we stop trying to, one, in the Black community, I think, present only the best of our community on stage and in theater and in film. And also, I think we need to show all of our community, the heroes and the villains. I believe that that's extremely important so that it humanizes the world and so that the world understands us just a little better. But as far as my philosophy regarding life and art, I just say do it. I don't have a lot of time for people who like to talk about it. We can have about 1 or 2 meetings. By the 3rd meeting, we need to be up doing something and making a change, because trust me, someone else is starting by doing and talking later. So that's where I come from.
This is for both of you. How do you attract the young to get into the arts?
First of all, I think I saw that same production with the one black girl in Annie. And the reason why I say that is an answer to your question, Daryl, is you have to see yourself. You have to imagine that you can be someplace. And I think about books. I know Dr. Lewis has a children's book. You have to be able to feel as though you belong. And the reality is, we as Black people have learned to, even when we don't belong in a space, to create our own space, right? We have mastered that. And that is a beautiful thing. But the reality is, it's like when you're younger, and it's almost like what Monteze just said as well. My mother used to say, do as I say, not as I do, right? But the reality is, children do what they see. So I think that the more that people are exposed to the vast majority of characters, right, the more they will be interested in pursuing it. It's also important to support after school programs, out of school time programs, all of these programs where kids go and learn and they're able to encounter and engage new stories and people and be creative. And a lot of times we stifle that because of fear of losing our children. But the reality is, they have to be able to live free. And part of that freedom is their imagination and us providing that space for them to dream. So
I think you're 100% right. It's about the cultivation of it, of the artist. And I think that most children, I don't have kids, but I do think that most children are artists before they're intellectuals. And somewhere along the way, either if it's an outside source or an inside fear, something tells them that they cannot do that they can't be that. And then therefore they abandon it. And I think that it's important that we support and cultivate it, not so much to say, hey, young person, I think that you should go into Hollywood and be a part of that, frankly, dangerous machine. But it's like, hey, young person, learn to take a theater class so that you know how to communicate, so that when you go into for an interview for your job, in whatever field that you would like to be prosperous in, you can walk in and feel secure with opening your mouth and speaking and selling the product that you will bring to that company. I could probably get a job that I'm nowhere near qualified for because I have what they call, the gift of the gab, which comes from theater. But I think that it's important that we allow artists to still be artists throughout their life and to not make them feel as though that they have to make a living in it, that they have to use that as the sustainable portion of their life, that they can just be an artist in this world. When it comes to getting young people into the audience, in the audience, that is what I'm most interested in finding out how to do. I think it's time that we ask young people, what do they want to see when it comes to theater? And we don't do that. We don't, and we look at youth as sort of fleeting and sort of, like we don't have to pay attention to the young because they have idealistic ways. And so we know the real world because we're a little older. But I think it's time to learn. I think it's time to learn what it takes to make a TikTok, because it's not easy. And like, how can you put that on stage? I mean, when you look at this pandemic and everyone's staying home, the people that thrived online were not your typical artists. They were your cousins, your friends, your neighbors who you didn't know could dance, who you didn't know could edit videos and do makeup and things of that nature. They were the ones thriving, where artists were kind of licking our wounds a little bit, and everyone else looked at it as an opportunity to showcase their art. And I think it's time that we support it and find a way to integrate that into commercial art.
Montez, I think that is brilliant. Your comments made me think of the young man who did this TikTok video where he played a multitude of characters. He had special effects, and as a result of his TikTok, he has signed a deal with Disney. So the opportunities are out there, and we have to tap into the technology, and we have to really open our eyes to the giftedness of our children. Now, in light of that, we've also talked about the hardships that artists face. Montez, can you talk about some of the challenges that African American artists are facing right now? For example, did those actors, seasoned actors who participated in Flyin West, which you guys produced via Zoom and which is still available on Facebook, did they get equity credit for that work?
The actors who were used in Flyin West are non-equity actors, and equity is the actors union. Essentially, equity protects the artist from abuse from the producer. That is the job of equity, and to offer fair wage, a living wage for the work, and different protections as any union would allow. It's such a deep question because the union is, while vital and necessary, it's also set up to where it costs $1,100. I think now it was $1,100 when I joined, but I think now it's $1,500 to join, and you have a certain amount of time to pay that off. But if you live in a city in which, let's say, you get your card and you're ready to work professionally, and you look at the season and there is no work for you or your type in that season, then you are at a standstill. And so I think that that is what really plagues the community, is the way that the hierarchy of the business. I'm not sure if I answered your question or not.
Well, you definitely did. And I think what you did for me is illuminate the fact that those actors who were stellar, the fact that they are not yet equity says to me that there's a problem. I mean, when you have someone like Carla, who played Miss Leah, who has been acting for decades and has been a part of numerous productions, the fact that she's not yet equity says to me that there is some sort of deeper systemic problem. Shaunda, am I on point there?
I mean, I think so. I started as an actress, but the reason why that journey quickly led to being a producer was because I was tired of playing the nurse, the conjurer, the exotic, there comes a point where you want to be Juliet or whatever version of that is in a story that centers Black people. And so if you are being trained in a university or trained places where those roles, which now there's a bit more cross-cultural casting, they call it, and all of these things, but at some point there's typecasting, and we've talked about that. I'm sure people have heard conversations regarding that in Hollywood, right? There was no Wakanda when I was coming up, or on stage there's still difficulty in getting those stories produced on the great white way of Broadway, right? And there are people who've had success, Pearl Cleage, but and others, many others, Antizaki Shange. But the reality is there are far too few for the number of people out here working. I agree with you. Carla Payne should have her Actors Equity card. That this is part of the reason Damascus has asked Monteze to do a class at the end of this month on Zoom where we can talk about his journey. How do you get your card? Who can I call? Like, I know working in philanthropy as a program officer, sometimes artists just are scared to call the 30th floor of some building and find out how to get funding. So you have to descend those 30 stairs and go into community and talk to people about how they can have access and what they need. And that onus is on the industry. I think that onus is on actors like Monteze who already have their card. And it's on people like me who happen to be on those floors, 30 floors in the air, working for foundations to go provide what people need, even if it is grants for $1,500 for people to get their equity card, which is something I'll be looking into following this conversation.
Oh, that is awesome. Absolutely. And one thing that I want to point out is, and I think that Dr. Leah, you basically stumbled upon it, is that equity is not contingent upon talent. That's the number one thing. It's contingent upon opportunity, luck, and being able to finance the card. But it is not solely about talent. I can tell you that as someone on both sides of the table, because there are times when I would call a non-equity person before I would call an equity person for a part, because I know that sometimes that person is going to work hard. That person is going to bring the fire, because in a way they have a little bit to prove. They don't have that card backing them up to say, oh, I got it. Because once you do that, you've lost it all. So I think that we have to change the narrative in our minds of how we put professional actors on pedestals, because guess what? As of March 15th, everybody was out of work. So it didn't matter if you had a card or not. No one was working. And right now, non-equity actors are going to get the work because our union isn't allowing us to perform at the moment. So it's going to be a shift. There's going to be a shift happening, but I'm interested in how we can protect our non-union artists in this, in a way, without having them have, to pay out of pocket for protection. So I'm looking into creating not an agency necessarily, but an organization that's going to have their back when they walk into theaters that are promoting change at the moment, because that's the popular thing to do. But we'll see in 2021 how much change is actually taking place within these theater companies.
The dialogue with Shaunda McDill and Monteze Freeland continues after this. You are listening to Codem Radio. Shaunda, you've mentioned that you've worked across the country. How did you migrate to Pittsburgh?
I received a call from Shay Wafer, who was another Yale School of Drama graduate. I had worked under her at Cornerstone Theater Company in LA, doing amazing in-community productions. And she was here as a vice president and called me while I was living in New York to ask me to come work with her. And I gladly accepted. There was to have something called the August Wilson Center for African American Culture in the middle of downtown was something nationally that even my colleagues who didn't live in Pittsburgh and had never been to Pittsburgh knew was a huge accomplishment in the nation. And so without hesitation, also, like I said, having studied with August Wilson, studied playwriting with him as an undergrad, having his producer be my dean at Yale School of Drama, to me, it was just a logical next step. So that's how I got here, thanks to her, and then remained, met my husband. And so it became built my life here.
And Monteze, you also migrated from Baltimore, and I want to hear about your journey, but I'm also interested in why you, an actor with equity, have stayed in Pittsburgh.
It's a very good question. I came to Pittsburgh when I was 19. I went to a different college right out of high school, and my two best friends came to Point Park. And I was at a college in the middle of Pennsylvania, very different from Baltimore. And I said, I can't do this. And mainly because there was no theater in the town. I said, well, I'm majoring in theater. There's not one theater in this town. So they convinced me to transfer to Point Park University, in which I did. And I was very grateful that I did, because I went to college with my best friends and we all majored in theater and we took over the school. I mean, my best friend was the valedictorian, and I mean, we ruled the place in a way. And when I graduated, I didn't have any money. I wasn't moving to the most expensive city in the country. So I stayed in Pittsburgh, and I had a professor who was like, stay here. Your type is missing from here. And I said, okay. And she's like, you'll work. And I said, okay. So I stayed, and the work started to come. And of course, I couldn't support myself just as an actor in Pittsburgh. So I started teaching, and from teaching theater into different programs and acting. And then I migrated into directing, because I wanted to, I was tired of other people telling our stories and being at the helm of our stories. So I wanted to be a director. And then I, continued playwriting, and I stayed in Pittsburgh primarily because there was work to be had. But I always kind of was running from Pittsburgh, even up until the beginning of this year. I would run back to Baltimore or DC and try to do work there, because they have a community that is more, I guess, open and accepting to the art that I was looking to produce. But ultimately, I didn't get my equity card until I was 30 years old. And so for me to stay here meant that there had to be work here. And in a way, I think from my actions convinced producers to make the work here in Pittsburgh, for myself and for others. And so now as a producer, I am interested in creating those opportunities for other people. But I don't think that the older I got, staying in Pittsburgh wasn't necessarily my thought, but I'm very grateful that I came back and can be in service to the community. That's why I came back.
In the short amount of time that we have left, can each of you, for our listeners, give them some positive thoughts on how they can do what you do, be what you are?
The song from The Wiz, I think I sing it before I do everything. Believe in yourself. You have to believe in yourself. No matter what business you're in, but especially in this business, you must believe that you have something to bring to the table, and that you are vital, and that you are a being who is deserving of goodness and deserving of your dreams. So I think the most successful people know that and understand that, and that's unwavering for them. I know I'm going to be successful. Shaunda knows she's going to be successful, and we walk into the room with that. There is no other choice. So I say, you have to believe in yourself.
I love what Montez just added. And I want to thank him really quickly before I close by saying that he is someone who is accepted in all circles. He is in the professional theater world. He's in all these different circles and could choose not to work on certain productions. But he continues to put the stories of Black people at the forefront, continues to want to work in community, continues to want to look out on the stage and see people who look like him. And that is a passion and a desire that is authentic, and you can't build into someone. But I will say that I think the answer is, in the world of all this social media, not to compare your journey to anybody else's. Do the work that you have to do. As Montez said, don't talk to everybody about everything. Just put your head down and do the work, because we have to all ask ourselves, are we doing what we're doing to be famous, or are we doing what we're doing to do the good work? And the good work and doing it does not always mean you will be famous, but it will mean you will be fulfilled.
Shaunda and Monteze, I want to thank you. Leah, you have any closing comments for them?
Well, I'm just thrilled that we had this opportunity. I think we covered a number of topics today. I want to encourage all of our listeners to go to Facebook, search for Flyin West, so you can see their outstanding production for yourself. You will be taken through a range of emotions. I know that I was, even as serving as narrator. I did go back and watch the production, and it's just profound. And as Shaunda and Monteze have articulated, a number of the issues that are in the play, Flyin West by Pearl Cleage, which is it's set in Nicodemus, Kansas in 1898, are still pertinent to the African American experience today. So again, I just want to encourage everyone to go to Facebook, search for Flyin West, view the production, and know that I wish Shaunda and Monteze the very best. I'm happy to be your colleague in Damascus Theater Collective, and I cannot wait to see what we do in the days ahead.
Shaunda and Monteze, I want to thank you very much. It was a pleasure. Learned an awful lot about what goes on with this. For Dr. Reverend Leah Lewis, I am Daryl Scott. Join us next week for another edition of Code M Radio.